Welcome to the Buy Box Bandits podcast.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Buy Box Bandits, brought to you by All Out Amazon and Flips for Miles. I believe this is episode 165. Today we have a rare third-time guest appearance from Dillon Carter, who's the founder of Aura Repricer, as well as, I'm going to say it every time, the Wholesale Made Easy podcast. Go listen to that. It's really good Amazon content, right? Even if there's been no episodes for 4 years, we're going to talk about that though and everything. But we really enjoyed having you on the past two times, and I really just like the way you think about business, especially from the sphere of, you know, an Amazon seller who really evolved in everything, man. But just for anyone who might not be familiar, can you just take us back to the early days getting into the space and everything like that?
Yeah, for sure. So at the time, I was a full-time personal trainer, essentially. I had, I turned my gap year to like 4 years because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in college.
The famous gap year that we always claim so many college degrees.
Yeah, I'm like, I know I want to do something. I just don't know what. Yeah, I knew I wanted to do like business, right? Like I had tried a bunch of side hustles and stuff like that. Nothing really worked, but I got heavy into like working out. Eventually got, nationally certified as a personal trainer. Did that to make money. And then I kind of hit like a big roadblocker, which was, okay, I want to make more. How do I make more? Well, I either work more hours or I charge more per hour. And I had found a niche just organically of working with like middle and high school kids that struggle with like confidence in their body and just at school and stuff. And so, I loved the work I did, but it got to a point where I'm like, if I want to make more, I have to charge these kids' parents more. And like, for me, I was just like, it feels wrong. I just didn't love it. And so I started to look for like what's more scalable, right? And that's when you get into like physical products, info products, which back then, like, 10-ish years ago, info products were definitely a thing, but it's not like the infrastructure was not there, right? You didn't have Gumroad and all these different payment processors. It was just way more difficult. And even, gaining attention just was not as easy back then. Like the platforms were so different and really like segmented. So I went the physical products route, heard about FBA via Pat Flynn's podcast, the Smart Passive Income podcast with the reselling family. So I was like, all right, cool. Let me go try this on the weekend. Started going to Targets, Walmarts, all that good stuff, doing RA. Eventually left the gym, was doing RA full time, decided that I wanted to go back to college full time as a finance major because of like, loved the idea of starting like a boutique private equity firm, acquiring, a bunch of companies, growing them, stuff like that, or going into investment banking. So I went back to college full time, which meant I had zero time to do RA. So I was like, all right, I got to go some other route that's more scalable. So I tested OA, which I was horrible at. It's so much easier now. Listen, if you're getting started with OA today, like, don't complain. Like it was so much harder back in the day. I'm like dating myself at this, but I realized, by the way, the other day that I've spent a third of my life in the Amazon space in some way, shape, or form, which is like bonkers to consider, man. Yeah. So I tried that. It didn't really take. And the next fork is like wholesale or private label. With, private label is fantastic if you got an income and like you got capital, you want to invest, roll it, let it build and exit. I think that's fantastic. I needed cash flow. I needed to pay my bills. So I set a rule for myself, which was I'm not allowed to buy inventory, no matter how profitable it is, unless it's wholesale. So like really put myself in a corner, like you got to figure it out. So struggled for about 2, 3, 4 months. And then finally it dawned on me what I was doing was sales, not wholesale. And I was like, oh, cool. Let me approach it from that perspective. And that's when things started to take off. So did that started to take off. And then at that time, I started to network with other wholesale based sellers, which then there was not a lot of us, to be honest. Like the perception was like, you need tens of thousands of dollars to get started and blah, blah, blah. You don't need any of that. You can start with like $500 if you needed to, really. And so did that, met my now co-founder, James. He was a computer science major doing wholesale. So we're like, hey, what's your process for this and that? Turns out it's the same process we had organically built independent of one another using like Trello and all these things. Basically, like how are we managing our suppliers, orders, all these things? And he's like, hey, I already basically took this and wrote the code to build the software, which is now called VinDriveCRM.com. So we came together, we partnered up. We started building the first wholesale based Facebook group. Now it's Discord, but again, back in the day it was Facebook groups. So we built that up and I live sourced for free. Like we didn't charge anything for that group. Like 15,000 people. I did that every Tuesday for like 2.5 years.
Which was so inspiring because you were doing that for like how long the sessions would you do for that?
Like 2 hours, man. Like,
it
was scheduled for an hour, but I would go through it and we would, get amazing questions. I deep dive on that. And so where people were charging like, tons of money to even just get you to a place where you understood what the heck wholesale even was. I was like, let's just give it for free. Like, love info products, not really my jam. I wanted to build software. So we're like, let's just teach all this for free. And that's when we ended up starting the Wholesale Made Easy podcast, which for me, again, that didn't exist. And I wanted content that was evergreen. I think this is so important. This is how we are as a company at Aura too, is like, I don't care about the short-term tactics, right? I care about you building a real company and the longevity of it. Like, and this is something we talk about a lot of times internally too, right? It's like, I don't want a new user, a new seller to come to us and be with us for 2 months and leave. I would rather you wait 3 months, come to us and be with us for the next 5+ years, right? That long-term value is what really matters. And so I think we got a little over 50 episodes on the Wholesale Made Easy podcast. I was like, great, I've hit everything plus a little bit more. And I felt like I was starting to push into short-term tactics, and I was like, I don't want to do that. So we're going to pause here. Again, like for me, it served as a good asset and resource to give back to the community that I would have wanted if I got started. And so, VinDrop CRM, we learned a lot. We messed up so much because like the price point's way too low. You're not going to build a scalable SaaS company off $27 a month. Like, good luck. Can't do paid acquisition, all these other things. And we took those learnings and we said, okay, well, we really love this though. Like, this is sick. So why don't we just take what we learned in that sandbox, if you will, learn from it, pivot over, and what's the thing that we think we could have the biggest impact on building? And that was repricing at the time, because we had used all the other tools. And we're like, honestly, it's cumbersome. The products are not great, and we think we could do a better job. And so that's what we did. We launched the beta December 2018 during winter break. I flew up to Amherst and we launched it, and I flew back and went back to class. And then it took off. It was awesome. Like, it's really taken off faster than we ever thought it would in terms of speed and size. And then we graduated college, started building out the team. For us, we've never outsourced anything. So like support, all that stuff is all in-house, like engineering, everything. Like, we're hiring another engineer now. Like, we pay 6 figures for engineers. So we wanted to build like an amazing team and company and product. And then we got to a point where we're like, great, we got capacity again. Let's start building more features onto Aura. And we're like, can't. Legacy is not designed to scale as far as it already has. If you fix one bug, you introduce 2 more. If you add one feature, it's going to take 3 months instead of 3 days. And that creates potential risk for our users. So we're like, we're going to pause and we're going to rebuild it from scratch. That's the only way forward that makes the most sense. And so we literally rewrote every line of code in what is now called the 1.0 system. And yeah, so, we introduced a ton of features, and that's like the whole arc from like, I didn't even know Amazon existed to where we're at today.
Yeah, it's crazy the way it evolves too. Cause like you get
Yeah.
started, man, and I'm sure your family was like, all right, like, dude, like you're going to these stores. Like,
Yes.
is that, bro, is that just the plan forever? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Cause
Yeah.
people, right? Cause the majority of the people just kind of you're around just day to day as a
Right.
human being in America is like, all right, like you get this thing and you maybe switch every 8 to 10 years or whatever, and they give you a little bit more money and stuff. So people are so conditioned to be like, all right, man, like that's it. That's just all you're gonna do. But they have no idea how it can evolve, man. And like thinking about like, how probably making the random decision to start that Facebook group is such a pivotal inflection point for you. Right. And it's the same way with me with our Discord, right? And that like, all right, like I like doing this. It feels good. I met Garrett. I met my friend Jake. I met Danny online, right, etc. Right? What are the other people out there we can find? Why don't we create and foster that for ourselves, right? And all these little things just build off each other. And no one could have kind of illustrated it and such. So getting like pretty tactical in terms of purely on the Amazon seller side of things. So you made a really good point. You said, I'm not in the wholesale business. I'm in the sales business. A lot of people, it's the new year. They just had a really good Q4 with arbitrage. What exactly do you mean by that? And then let's dig in on really tactical stuff they can apply for that stuff.
Yeah. If you break down the skills required, at the end of the day, we identify sellers based on how they source. It's your sourcing method. You know what you really are? You're an e-commerce seller, right? You're an e-commerce company, period. You're a retailer. How you purchase your inventory does differentiate you from one another. So, I have a lot of kind of bold predictions when it comes to AI and how things are going to change in the near future. And I've been saying lately that a lot of sellers that use VAs, virtual assistants, for sourcing will eventually be using digital assistants for sourcing. Now, why do I say that? Break down exactly what a VA does, right? They scour and research the internet and move information around. right?
Yeah,
What are
compare
computers?
buy cost to a sell
Right.
price,
Yep,
sales rank at a
Right.
certain threshold.
Right. Do you know why you can't do that via code right now? Because it's very complex, because scraping websites is actually not that easy of a thing to do, and nobody's really built it yet. But AI right now is changing that, right? Because now you can have a system that it doesn't need to be coded. You just say, here's a page, and it goes, great. The price is there. I don't have to explicitly say in the code, the price is there, and that's how you identify it. It just goes, it's right there. Like, I already got you covered, right? And so that's one aspect. Like, if we break down OA, that's all you're doing. You're moving information around on the internet, period, right? Submitting orders, all that stuff. There's nothing physical about it. Wholesale is very different.
Subjective, yeah.
Wholesale is where you transition from transaction-based model to relationship-based model, right? Networking matters. Talking on the phone matters. Okay, so let's boil down first principles. What are you doing? You are contacting brands or distributors to open an account. Sounds straightforward, but the reality is you have to sell them to get approved. The fact that it's not auto approval means there's some level of you convincing them to allow that to occur. That's just called sales, right? And so I got so frustrated when I was calling brand after brand and literally had a guy laugh in my face. And I got so annoyed and frustrated that I was like, dude, all right, listen, I get it. I'm not getting the account and you hate me. Tell me why. I was like, break that down for me. And he told me this, that's why I hate Amazon sellers. I go, great, wrote down a list. So then I said, okay, cool. I'm going to take those objections, which is what they are called in the sales world, and I'm going to create ways to respond to those or hit them before they're even given to me. So I changed my pitch. So a lot of so the reasons that they came up with, like there was like a handful, like 4 or 5 top level objections. They hardcore negotiate on price and then place really small orders. They want to negotiate on the MOQs, even though nobody else bats an eye, but only Amazon sellers want to say, I can't do 500 units. I can only do 50 units. And that's all I want to do. Okay, great. So now when I open up the conversation, I go, hey, I'm an e-commerce brand. I'm looking to purchase products in this category. And I'm looking to spend, 20 to 30 grand with a brand in this category in the next 30 to 60 days. So now I've hit the small number, blah, 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 right? There's a whole thing you do. But even on the MOQ, I want to do test buys. So what I will say is, hey, listen, I don't know how this is going to go. And so to de-risk it, what I would like to do is place a small order just so I can push it through the logistics and make sure there's no red flags and nothing gets stalled. The moment it goes live and it starts selling, I'm coming back to you. And by the way, that's usually going to take, 2 days by the time it gets checked in. So give me about a week. The moment they start selling, I know we're good. I can start to pump more inventory through. I'm immediately going to call you and let's go ahead and place a full order. I've already let him know my intentions, which is the volume I'd like to spend. Now, can I spend 30 grand with you or not? That's a different discussion. But I'm also giving rationale as to why I'm placing a smaller order. Right. And so you just get hyper rational about it. So like, no matter what you're doing, you have to understand and break down and turn into components the skills involved. If you can do that, now you can say, oh, it's really this. So let me go learn that skill. You know how many books are written for sales? Plenty.
Be a
Go read
million.
3,
lot,
you're
yeah.
done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like, how do you go from 0 to 80% in a skill relatively overnight? Well, you have to first define it. It's like, half of solving a problem is clearly defining the problem. So let's clearly define it. And now we know exactly what to go do to get on it. So this is why I always recommend sellers to not identify themselves as sellers. You're a business owner, you're a founder, you're an entrepreneur. You need to consume information outside of the Amazon space because a lot of people are not. They stay stuck in this bubble.
So
Another
much,
example.
man. So much. Yeah. Exactly.
But the software space, Amazon software is the exact same way, right? The reason why we have stood out a ton, especially recently with the 1.0 system and a lot of the stuff we're working on now is we don't look at what is our competition doing, what is Amazon software doing. We look at what is tech doing. Because what are we? We're a software company. We're a tech company. So whereas a lot of your Amazon software companies are outsourcing the development, they're outsourcing support. We go, well, let's break this down. When we were sellers, we used software. The support sucked constantly. Okay, fix it. Problem solved. What's the best practice for X, Y, and Z? And then all of a sudden, it's like you're playing on a completely different, stratosphere, but the reality is you're just following the best practices of really the thing you do, right? So I talk to a lot of potential founders and they're like in the Amazon software space and like, yeah, I'm just trying to outsource, find a shop I could just pay to code for me. I was like, wait, hold on. You want to start a tech company or you want to start a software company and not write software? It's kind of weird, don't you think? Like, think about that, right? And so that perspective allows you to operate and make very different decisions than the average in the thing that you do, right? So to take it back to the wholesale, a lot of people are like, well, I can send 400 emails a day. Yes, you can. What's your open rate? Well, I tend to get, a 10% open rate on emails. Great. Okay. So if you're sending $400 or 400 emails a day to 400 potential leads and getting 10% of those to open, I know my numbers and I can open anywhere from 30 to 40% of them. So why don't you go ahead and give me one day of your list, 400 people. I'll open up 3 to 4x the accounts you will, and I'll build a $250,000 to $1 million business on top of that one day. But I'm going to call them, right? Getting down to the math, the first principles of what's really happening matters. So when people are like, oh, I can just do this, but what's the alternative? Because maybe the alternative is dramatically better. Now it might be more work, but this is where a lot of sellers trade effectiveness for efficiency, right? They're like, yeah, but it's super fast and it's efficient. Doesn't matter if it's not effective. Now you're just efficiently ineffective.
First, yeah, I mean, it's all about differentiating, right? In the outreach.
It is. Yeah, 1000%. So when people are complaining, oh, like they hate Amazon sellers, no, they hate your approach. So approach them differently. Don't be an Amazon seller anymore. You know what I am? I'm an e-commerce company, and we happen to utilize Amazon. Why? Because it's a great platform for sales. I'm not an Amazon seller anymore. I'm just an e-commerce brand who happens to sell on Amazon.
Yeah, dude. And it's crazy thinking about because I used to watch a lot of the wholesale sourcing videos. I literally, man, I swear for the first time in like 3 years on like 2 weeks ago, I was doing OA sourcing and basically there were like all these separate listings for this one brand's product. So I went on Amazon and searched it and did the price filter like you used to do the $25 minimum because I knew what I was paying for, right? So it's a similar model, but like it's crazy how effective that it is in a modern context with like knowledge around keep a product finder and stuff with those filters and everything. Garrett talks a lot about that in his content these days, man. But
it's crazy because like he was talking about a lot of that stuff 5 years ago, and most of it still holds true.
Pretty much all of it, yeah.
Right, the differentiation in the outreach, the value that you have to present, right? The different forks of the spoon in your outreach, all that still holds true.
But think about this. That has nothing to do with being an Amazon seller. You know what we do at Aura? We differentiate. How? By creating a higher quality product, by doing the things our competitors won't do, which is like sit down with 300 of our users to prototype a design that's going to change 1,300 times in the next 3 weeks before we ever, write a line of code, right? Like how you do anything does matter and the details do matter. So like what I try to get across is what are the fundamentals that no matter where you go, because you might be an Amazon seller today, but tomorrow you might not. You might be a software founder next time, right? Like just like me, it's like you need things that you can go into any business and have the right perspective on it, right? Because then the little nitty gritty details, like if I go into a tanning salon business, it's like, oh, like there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of things that's not overlap. Great, I'll just have to go learn those new things. But that's actually relatively straightforward now, right? And so at the end of the day, your language, your perspective matters. Language matters because
so
if you
much,
look at books
man. I
written
hate,
for
I hate how people talk about themselves, man. I hate that stuff. Yeah, it's so much it matters.
But
it's like, oh, I
think
got
about
lucky
this.
or unlucky.
Yeah.
No, that I'm not lucky. I'm not the type of person. Like,
right.
if it doesn't help you, don't say that you're a certain trait. I hate that stuff.
But there's nuances to this, right? So there's ones that you don't think hurt you, but do. I'll give you a good example. I wrote this in one of our recent blog posts. Sellers, most sellers identify as business owners, not founders. I understand why. However, go look up books written for business owners on Amazon. Go look at the average recommendations. Then go look at business books for founders. Guess what? Every founder is a business owner, and most business owners founded the company. So there's really no difference. But the reality is the recommendations are vastly different. I'll give you a good example. Business owners, that perspective, it tends to be your special, your time's incredible, and you should outsource everything. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that on surface, but here's a different view. As a founder, you should be the dumbest person in your company. You should hire the best and the people who have already done the thing that you're attempting to do. And you should pay incredibly well. Now, do founders still outsource things? Yes. Do founders still have assistants? Yes. But you see how what we've done just through simple language is we've separated and siloed this information. And what's happening is a lot of sellers are only receiving this information, not this other information. And so you're missing massive amounts of perspective that, again, when I was talking about how, like, at Aura, we look at tech for best practices, not Amazon software for best practices. It's the same thing here. Go look at the best practices and what's recommended for founders and apply it as a business owner. All of a sudden, you're operating on a different level. And these things matter, right? When you talk about scale, right? Like, one of the questions I used to ask myself is, how can I process 30,000 units a month this just as easily as I can 30 units a month? That's a crazy question, but the reality is, actually, you can do that. You know how you do that? You switch over to wholesale, where it doesn't matter for your time if you place a 3,000 unit order or a 30,000 unit order. It's just changing numerical values on your computer. Send it all to a prep center, because guess what? As it increases, your time doesn't have to increase. Yeah, you're paying more with a variable cost, but guess what? You don't have to deal with it now, right? You have to get to the things that matter, asking really good questions. And in doing so, you find incredible answers. And most of the time, it's not even hard stuff, right? You're just like, oh, like, okay, that's actually pretty straightforward. Let's go do that now.
So let's dig into like the mental evolution of selling things on Amazon and flipping things in terms of eventually graduating to like the business owner founder that you're talking about, right? Because not unfortunately, like a lot of our audience, a lot of our viewership are flipping things, are selling things. Buying something for 10, selling it for 22, buying something for 20, selling it for 45, over and over and over again, right? You make good money, but ultimately, in terms of like scalability and getting to other things and maybe branching out with a prep center or branching out to a software, things like that, well, it takes a little bit more. So let's dig into like that evolution from the 18-year-old that's selling 250,000, which plenty of them exist, to eventually being 25-year-old and being the person that can start an Aura or Seller Amp or something like that.
Yeah. I don't think you're ever ready. I wasn't ready. I mean, we jumped in. I was like,
for anything, man. Yeah, literally for anything. Yeah, like it's all these people saying like, I'll get started. They just never do, like, because they benefit so much more from doing it today.
I mean, to be honest, like I co-founded a prep center with a friend because they were wanting to do it. I was like,
Miles and I both use Finn's our dog.
Yeah. So it's just fun to work on. I was like, let's figure it out, right? Like you gain so much from actual hands-on experience than studying, right? So that evolution, I think, comes down to a few things. The first one is, are you building a business or a company? I think those two things are very different. Neither is better than the other, but they're different. My Amazon business was a business. Aura is a company. It exists outside of me. It is larger than me. I am not the sun in that solar system, so to speak, right? Like our team is, like the product is, our customers are. And so the decisions you make when you're building a business are very different than when you're building a company. And, going back to the language conversation, if you're a hustler or a flipper, I'm like, I get what you're saying, but like, that's actually holding you back.
Because so many people, if they go on vacation, their business takes a step back, stops, halts, whatever.
Right. The reality is, I'm not saying you shouldn't work hard. You should always work hard. That's a requirement, but how you work does matter, right? Working smarter versus harder, like that whole kind of conversation perspective. But a lot of sellers are just like, oh, I'm just going to hustle, like not sleep. I'm like, good luck doing that long term, dude. You're going to burn out. And like, listen, I get it. Like, I'm getting old. I just turned like 32. So I'm like, I can't hustle like I used to, but the reality is, like, there's a required amount of hustle and hard work to get up and running. But after that, it's like, you have to get more strategic. You have to think about what are the biggest growth levers, right? So I'm a big fan of, like, every business has a singular growth lever and a singular bottleneck that, if fixed or worked on, would have outlandish results compared to anything else, right? For a lot of sellers, you're like, oh, like, if I say, how do you quadruple your revenue in the next 30 days? Going back to the conversation, like hard questions, right? Well, you got a few things you could do. Well, in Amazon, you basically have more inventory, so you're spending more. Oh, and that's kind of it, right? Like, so, okay, what's the bottleneck? Is it you don't have enough time to do it, or you don't have enough capital? Okay, great. If it's the capital problem, go raise capital, go raise debt, go raise equity, bring out a partner, whatever makes sense. So if you can view the business as like a machine, or like, for software, for SaaS, I always think about it as one massive math equation, because it really is. Like, all your metrics, work together in some fashion. You're looking at churn and all these things. And then you understand what's the bottlenecks in the machine, in the math, in the process. Go fix that. So what a lot of sellers are doing is wasting a lot of their time, right? A lot of sellers have, let's say, 4 hours a day to work on a business, and they're like, oh, I'm right now I'm learning how to hire a VA. Well, are you already spending 4 hours of your day sourcing? Well, no, I'm still struggling with that. Then why the heck are you learning how to hire somebody? Like, you don't even know, you can't even train anybody, right? So like, this is a big conversation, which is like the difference between just-in-time information and just-in-case information. Just-in-case information is stuff that you're like, oh, I probably should know that. But can you apply it now or in the very near future? No, then forget about it. Because guess what? Like, that information still exists on the internet. You can get it when you need it. Just-in-time information is, I need to hire a VA. Actually, I've never done it and I don't know how to do it. Great. Go figure out how to do it and then go do it. Then move on. The speed at which you're able to operate and the freedom of time that you're able to reclaim from that shift is profound. I struggle with this a lot because I'm naturally, curious and intrigued by everything. And I'm like, oh, like, I don't like, that's interesting. Save that in my notes for later, right? Like, I can retrieve that when I need. But there's like this whole FOMO of like, well, I need to know X. And no, you don't. You don't need to know how to be a 7-figure seller before you're a 5-figure seller. You just start selling and you solve problems as they go. So, there's a lot to that, but the person that's 18, that's just like flipping stuff right now, that's like, I really want to blow this up. You got to think differently and you got to ask different questions. You got to understand, like, you're going to have to like build a team. I see a lot of sellers where they're like, I don't want to manage people. Well, how big of a business do you want? Well, like 7-8 figures. You think you're going to get that big without building a team? Good luck. You have to. So guess what? That's a skill you now need to go learn. So I think a lot of it comes down to perspective shifting. And the second order of that is the decisions you make are different.
In terms of like a tactical plan, is the first step just creating an organization, creating a setup where you can leave? I know Mike McCallum's talked about that. I think you read a book
great
about
guy.
it.
Yeah.
Like the forced vacation,
Awesome guy.
6 months out, you take 4 months, whatever it is.
Clockwork. Yeah.
Is the tactical plan like to create a system where your team, your organization is sourcing when you're not, prepping and producing when you're not, and doing all the account help when you're not?
You shouldn't be the linchpin to everything, right? And like, I mean, listen, today I still am in a lot of ways at Aura, right? Because we're actively building and like, it's really complex. I like love being in the inner workings, but like, I can go, on a 2-week honeymoon like I did, and like the team's still chugging along without me, right? Like, but I still have like a lot of like day-to-day like responsibilities, of course. So, it's not like you need to get there in 60 days, right? Like, you might love being in day-to-day, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I do too, but how do I phrase this? You really need, I like breaking things down into components and then saying who owns that component.
Yeah, like the sourcing, the prepping. I would love to hear you break that down, how you think about that in the context of an Amazon business. Yeah.
Man, like, I think it was like 8 years ago when I used to write for the VinDrive CRM blog post. I wrote one that was basically like the entire wholesale business model fits on a napkin. And I showed that. It's not very complex, actually. So if you can turn everything that you do, right? Write out, like, as you're doing work, write it down. What is it? I'm sourcing, managing orders, I'm repricing, blah, 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 right? And then you say, okay, cool. Who do I need to go hire to do those things? Dan Martell has a fantastic book that recently came out, Buy Back Your Time. He kind of breaks it down more sequentially, where he's like, there's a set sequence of which you hire people. The first one is an administrative assistant. They can take off a lot of like the easy, like, low value things that still need to get done, scheduling, whatever. And then you go to like support, and then you go to fulfillment, and then to sales, right? And like, that's great for most businesses. For e-commerce, it's a little different, I think, especially for resellers. But I like that model of break down every task you're doing and then say, what are the roles here? And then you go hire somebody to do those roles. This is why I'm so fundamentally against people saying I have X number of VAs. No, you do not. You might have an administrative assistant, but then you have 3 sourcing specialists, and then you have a procurement manager. but like, and I was talking with Corey on his podcast about this actually, and he went and actually retitled all his assistants because he's like, oh yeah, they're not assistants, and like they're way more proud to be like, oh yeah, I'm sourcing specialist number 3, right, or sourcing specialist, level 2, whatever, right? Like you can have fun with it, but the difference there is you're not hiring somebody to complete tasks, you're hiring somebody to own an outcome. Like there's a very big difference in saying, I'm hiring you so I can tell you what to do, and I'm hiring you to figure out how to make this outcome real. The how, that's your job. That's not my job anymore. My job is to decide the what and the why. You decide the how. We work together. We still support one another, right? That's why like every Monday I do one-on-ones with everybody on the team. But it's like, you figure that out. Like that's your role now, right? And so making even that shift can be incredible in terms of shifting from like, I'm a business owner, I'm a hustler, to like, oh, I'm building a company here. And this is something where like, not everything is routed through you either, right? And so like, if your sourcing specialist has a question, well, why do I need to answer that when my order management specialist can answer that? Y'all work together. Everybody's in Slack. Self-organize, self-solve problems. And then now all the minutia that crops up day to day, you go, if it comes to you, go, hey, have you asked this person? Have we documented that? Have we written an SOP? No. Okay. Can you go do that for me? All right, cool. So you're trying to take things that get asked constantly and say, well, either write the SOP, the documentation, or go ask the right person. I'm not that person anymore. Let me know if something comes up. That helps a ton.
Sweet. Okay. Another thing I think would be cool for the audience, book recommendations. You got any? Because I assume you probably got some fire for us. You already mentioned a couple, but yeah, what you got for us in regards to book recommendations?
I got a lot.
For let's target you in college and like gap year, the Amazon seller who just dropped out of college, like those initial, the vast majority of the people, right? So the young hustler and then the works a 9 to 5 currently.
Okay.
But really doesn't want to work the 9 to 5 6 months or now or a year from now.
Sure. I still think the 4-Hour Work Week is a great mindset shift. I think that's a evergreen book. The next one I would read after that is Work the System by Sam Carpenter. Everybody recommends the E-Myth. It's way too story driven. It's not tactical enough. Work the System is like, he literally made it free, and he's like, it's E-Myth revisited, but him applying it to his business and be like, here's exactly how you do that. And like his business is still crushing it. So that's a testament to it. So you'll come out of that book knowing exactly how to build systems, exactly how to do the tactical stuff we're talking about here. And then if you want to take that a bit further, I would start looking at things like high output management, I think is what it's called. It's basically the guy who ran Intel and like blew up Intel in a positive way. Like, great guy. Andy Grove is his name. He actually created the concept of like OKRs, if you're familiar with that, like objectives, key results, which Google follows, right? So you can see how quickly I only give you like 2 business related books. Now we're going to like founders and startups, right? A lot of that stuff matters though. I feel like that, plus I'm going to give you a zinger here. Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. I think most people do not understand how to manage information, tasks, things like that. And like, your brain is just straight up not a hard drive. It's a processing unit. It's a CPU.
I dig into that though. Yeah. Because I need to read that, but
Getting Things Done by David Allen is like a classic. The book is not a great read. Just go summarize it, watch a YouTube video on it. But he makes the argument that the brain is not a hard drive. It's a CPU. It's a processing unit, which is good and correct if you think about it, right? Like, how good is your memory? Well, the average human being, it's not that great. So this gets into like extended cognition, which is like, your phone is a part of your brain. Why? Because you put information there, you store it, and you retrieve it, right? So now your phone is technically an external hard drive to your brain. That kind of stuff starts to matter, because now what you get to say is, I have all these inputs coming to me, but instead of me having to be like, oh, let me remember that, let me do, no. Put all your stuff, all your tasks into a to-do manager, like Todoist.
You have a lot of those efficiency hacks, I remember.
Yeah. But even on the information side, so I recently switched from using Evernote, because that went to hell in a handbasket, to I'm now testing an app called Lazy that has like AI built in and stuff. And so if I come across something that's interesting, I will save it to Lazy, because I don't need to read it now, right? This is that just in time versus just in case. That's a just in case thing that's kind of fun. I don't need it now. I just came across it. I store it for later when I do need it. But now I can go to my notes and say, I do have that problem. Let me search for everything that I've stored related to that. Now I will go through, read it, summarize it, take the action items and all that good stuff. But also just things that I need later, right? Like there's just things that you reference all the time. Like, great, like don't try to remember. Your memory sucks. Put it in a notes app. It could literally be your notes app on iPhone. It doesn't matter the tool, it matters the action there, right? And so we do this with even more complex things of like hiring, right? Like we don't hire every week. So we're able to basically like freeze how we did the last one and circle back when it's ready. We like reactivate it. And what's nice is, yeah, there's definitely changes, new roles and stuff, but I'm not starting from scratch now. Like when we're writing a JD, a job description, I'm not starting from scratch. I'm making tweaks now because we really spent a lot of time really figuring this thing out. And now that's stored, in our internal documents as a team. So now we go from, it's going to take us 2 weeks to get a JD live to I can get it live in 30 minutes and ready to go, like salary, everything. I know exactly where to go to like benchmark salaries. Boom, 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 boom. We're done. We can hire super fast.
Well, see, now here's the thing though. There's such an important point there in that the first time you do something, it's going to be hard, difficult, complex, but the 18th time you do it, it's the same thing with like product research, man, or wholesale outreach or anything, right? But the key is you got to go through those initial reps if you're newer and you know what I mean? You just got to do it, but you'll get more efficient over time. When you manual source a new website for OA, you don't know what to look for yet, but if you've been through that site for 3 straight quarterly sales or whatever, right, significantly easier and such too. Another thing I'm curious your perspective on is someone who, similar to myself, right, you're betting big on the Amazon space, at least I think in terms of where a lot of your time's going, right? So like, how do you see the future of it evolving? And I assume pretty much just based on actions, you got to be really bullish on it and such.
Yeah, I mean, super bullish. I think it's going to continue to change. Again, I don't just look exclusively at Amazon. I'd take a step back, right?
True.
Because I'm looking at like what's becoming true with tech and how's that going to affect Amazon. I'm looking at multi-channel, Walmart starting to take off a little bit more. So I think eventually you'll go multi-channel, kind of by default, which is its own problem. My bullish bet, and like, this is something we're talking a lot about internally at Aura, is like sellers are drowning in data, but it's not presented or given in a way that's insightful or actionable. And like, that's a travesty, and because it's all data, because it's rarely physical what we do outside of like prepping. But again, I mean, heck, we can get prepping robots. We're already looking at those too. A lot of what you're doing will change because like we finally hit an inflection point in the last like year where AI has becoming a real thing that solves real problems. This is like a big bet we made at Aura, obviously, with Maven. But even outside of that, I remember testing just ChatGPT, like off the shelf ChatGPT. I was like, I'm going to teach you how to do listing optimization. And it did a pretty good job with me. Like, it's not even built to do that, right? Like I could refine it and all these things and be fine. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to lean and act more like a software company than an e-commerce company, right? You're kind of going to abstract away the physicality of being a seller, right? The prep and all that stuff. That's already kind of gone that way anyways. But I think what's going to happen is the automation that becomes possible in terms of like the intelligence, right? Like right now you can automate moving information. That's a non-issue, right? That's just basic code. But what happens when a system can analyze your entire inventory and say, based on vast amounts of your data, all these things, that's a good buy or that's a bad buy, or, hey, you need to restock this. By the way, just give me the thumbs up and I'll go to the site and place the order for you. And you just go, yeah, sounds good. And it does the whole OA order for you. That's technically possible today. It's just not readily accessible and built for this use case. Like we could build that in a weekend and it's not going to be perfect, but like we could do it. And so a lot of your VAs will go away for what I mentioned earlier in the conversation, which is what are they really doing? They're moving information around on the internet. AI is pretty good at doing that. So I think you'll get more leverage, which is a positive, right? Oh, everything I'm saying is like a positive, optimistic view is like, you're going to get way more leverage, and one Amazon seller is going to be able to compete with a seller that has 10 full-time US-based team members. you will be able to do that. The biggest limiter is going to be access and understanding those tools, as well as capital. But I think capital's still relatively cheap. So I think that won't even really be a problem. I think it's really going to be understanding and your willingness to go learn these things. This is why I keep telling people, like, go play with these tools, because there's a lot of things you can use that you don't realize you do that you don't have to do anymore. You have tools that help with sourcing, but they're old in the sense that they rely on hard written code for web scraping. I think a new class of modern software is coming to Amazon. We're hoping that we are really one of the first ones. This is why we call like Aura one of the first modern Amazon repricers, because like it was written like this year. Like most of them are not, and they're usually old code and like thinking, in kind of the old world, which I kind of get, we still have some of that too with role-based stuff, but like where's the world going? And like that's what you got to build for. And I think sellers, especially like the younger sellers coming in, like you have this clear differentiator between like the old guard, which I feel weird calling myself now, where it's like, the expectations for software is like so horrible. And then like you have a new set of sellers coming in that are used to products like Apple being easy and intuitive and awesome to use.
The Amex kids and the non-Amex kids. That's the way we'll delineate. But here's the problem though, is that at least for the most part, right? There's a lot of non-Amex kids complaining about the Amex kids. This is
what's a different perspective.
Yeah.
But welcome to the evolution, right? This is always ever evolving.
Yeah, of course.
But what's nice is like y'all's expectation of software is very different than the old guard, and that's a good thing, because the standard was so low when I was a seller that you just dealt with it. Well, now we can just build whatever the heck we want. And we have access to technology that is now outside of the research academic phase and is in the actual mainstream. We can go build incredible things. And so, I wrote a blog post on VinDrive CRM where I was kind of theorizing even way back then. And it was like, using Alexa or Siri was like, hey, place me a restock order with this brand. And my fantasy was like, oh, it would go through all my data. It would understand how much cash I had available and would say, okay, cool. Like, here's what makes sense. And then fire off that PO and manage everything for me. That was like, I'm thinking, 15 years down the line, that's possible today. You just got to build it, obviously. Like, this is our biggest issue at Aura. Like, there's so many of these kind of things. We're like, oh, I'd be so sick, but like, we have to prioritize. But all these things are possible now. And so I think sellers need to start thinking about how they differentiate themselves from an operations perspective too. Like, how can you as an individual do the same workload of like 5 or 6 people without having to actually work 5 or 6 people's time, right? Using tech, using software, using AI, things like that.
Cool. Okay. And then do you mind plugging where everyone can find you if they want to follow you, check out, product suite and stuff you got going on?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm fairly active on Twitter now. So Dillon_Carter, I think is what my handle is. GoAura.com. We're doing a lot of cool stuff. We just, came out of the 18 months of rebuilding Aura from the ground up, like every line of code. So released Maven, released Hyperdrive. Hyperdrive is actually incredible. I didn't think it was gonna be as impactful as it is. That's been insane. And then, mobile support. I texted you guys before I pulled up Aura on my Tesla screen.
Super gangster,
yeah. So we're doing a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot of stuff in stealth mode that we're working on now too. So like, what's nice is, in Legacy, we couldn't move very fast. Now we can. So we have releases every single week. We're doing a lot of education, a lot of content. And yeah, so come check us out. We don't ask for a credit card. I'm not very salesy. My whole thing is like, go with what performs the best. And like, that's what you should pay for. And that's what we're building.
Obviously you put a lot of time in GoAura. What is the thing that you're like most proud of? What makes it like most unique and kind of like most valuable to the marketplace?
There's like 2 major things. One is the design. You don't realize how important UI UX is. We're probably one of the only software companies that has a full-time product designer on the team. Like, we pay him full-time, like Tasso, he's in office. His entire job is, how do I make this look and feel amazing? And so he will sit down with users. We will prototype designs before we even write code. And a lot of the feedback we got when we released it was like, hey, this is like Apple vibes. I was like, that's amazing. Like, that for me, I'm a huge like Apple fanboy. So I was like, the fact that we got that, like, hey, I'm good. So I think Aura has just become, one, faster, 2, just dramatically easier to use. Like, I would jumped into a call this morning with a group to help them like hey, here's how you get set up from like you just joined to like you're up and running and repricing, and it's like a 5-minute call, right? Like it takes no time at all. And then the second thing really is Maven. Like I'm really proud of this. We were not expecting like crazy performance from the first version of this model because it's new, right? Obviously we alpha tested and beta tested and stuff, but the feedback we're seeing is like more often than not, people are getting sales above the buy box. We're seeing a lot of interesting behaviors that are coming out, and this is V1, right? Like there's so much more we want to do with it. So very proud of that. It's one of those things where when you first release it, you're like, it should work this way, but you need a lot of sample to know, right? And so you start to
We
beta
never know
test
what
and
the
you,
algorithm, how it's going to react.
yeah, but you know, we beta tested it with a small number, and we started seeing really, really good results. And you know, we've even had like a lot of our larger sellers go from 100% role based, like all we offered in Legacy, to 100% Maven. Margins going up, sales are going up, and they're like, dude, what the hell? I'm like, that's what it's built for, you know. And then you put on hyperdrive, like I mentioned, which is just that speed. You know, I think sellers are struggling with two key things right now. It's complexity and speed. And so Maven's designed to handle complexity without you having to really be like a pro understanding settings and stuff. There's one setting, right, in Maven, which is awesome, and you get to handle far more complexities. And then hyperdrive handles speed. So you know that kind of perspective of, you know, we're not necessarily building a strategy or building a bunch of strategies for you. We're building a model that can run its own experiments, store that in memory, know exactly what's going to happen, and then tweak and adapt in real time. That's pretty impressive. Like your strategy today in Maven, what it built is different than tomorrow because the listing has changed, your competition has changed, like the demand has changed. And so you're able to take this far more dynamic approach instead of saying, I have 5 to 7 role-based strategies, and then in these cases I switch it. You can get away from that and just say, hey, handle all that for me. And then like, I'm going to get back to sourcing. Perfect. So those are the two things I'm really proud of. But even like mobile support, like everything's mobile supported, that's just nice, you know?
You forgot to plug the Wholesale Made Easy podcast too, though.
Yeah, true.
In the suite.
True.
Yeah. So y'all check out my boy on there too as well. Right. I mean, while you're at it, might as well go back in the Facebook group, scroll back a couple years, watch the live sourcing too.
Exactly.
And such. Cool. Appreciate you doing this, man. Excited to do it again.
Of course.
Y'all check out Dillon on Twitter and everything, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.